I rode into Black Hollow under a sky that looked bruised. The clouds hung low over the Texas hills, purple and black, heavy with rain that had not yet decided whether to fall or just threaten every living soul beneath it. My horse, Bishop, stepped slow through the mud road leading into town, his ears flicking at every creak of timber and every loose shutter banging against a storefront. Black Hollow had once been a mining town. You could tell by the bones of it. The old assay office still stood beside the main street, its windows filmed with dust. The general store had a faded sign, swinging from one chain. A row of worker cabins leaned against the hillside like tired men after a long shift. Farther west, beyond the town, the dark mouth of the abandoned mine sat carved into the mountain, half hidden by pine trees and fog. I had seen towns like it before, places that had boomed too fast, burned too bright, and then been left behind when the silver veins dried up or the railroad chose a better route. Men came to places like Black Hollow chasing fortune. Most left with empty pockets. Some never left at all. I had no business there beyond passing through. At least, that was what I told myself. My name is Wade Mercer. Some folks knew me as the red-haired cowboy. Others called me the quiet gun. A few, usually drunk and standing behind braver men, called me a coward. I never corrected them. A man who spends his life answering every insult with a bullet will eventually meet someone faster, meaner, or luckier. I had learned that before I turned 25. I had learned it in smoke, in mud, and in the screaming aftermath of war, when young men begged for mothers who would never hear them. So I made myself a rule. I never drew first. It was simple enough for most men to misunderstand. They thought it meant I would not fight. They thought it meant I was afraid of blood. They thought it meant a man could spit near my boots, laugh at my hair, reach for his gun, and find me frozen. But the truth was different. I kept my hand still because I knew exactly what it meant when it moved. By the time I reached the first buildings, rain began ticking against my hat brim. A thin, cold rain, the kind that made dust turn slick and made every lantern glow soft around the edges. Black Hollow was too quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. Not empty. Quiet. There were horses tied outside the saloon. Smoke came from chimneys. A lamp burned in the sheriff's office. I saw curtains shift as I passed. Faces appeared and vanished in windows. People were there. They were just trying not to be seen. Bishop snorted, and I patted his neck. "Easy, boy," I murmured. "I don't like it either." The main street stretched ahead toward the train station, a small wooden building with a narrow platform and a water tower leaning beside it. A telegraph line ran along the road, disappearing into the rain. I had planned to buy oats, coffee, and maybe a dry place to sleep if the price was fair. I had enough money for a room, though I preferred barns. Barns did not ask questions. Barns did not stare at a man's gun belt and wonder whether they could make a reputation from him. As I passed the saloon, the batwing doors opened. 3 men stood inside the glow watching me. They were not miners. Not ranch hands either. Their coats were too fine beneath the trail dust, their boots too polished, their gun belts worn too low for honest work. One had a scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. Another chewed a cigar that had gone out. The third smiled like he had already decided how my funeral would look. I kept riding. The smiling one stepped out onto the boardwalk. "Evening, Red," he called. I did not answer. "Man talks to you. You supposed to look at him." I looked straight ahead. Behind me, one of the others laughed. My fingers rested loose near the reins, nowhere close to my revolver. I could feel the weight of the Colt at my hip, as familiar as an old wound. Men had died looking at that gun. More men had lived because I chose not to touch it. The smiling man walked along the boardwalk, matching my slow pace. "You got a name?" "Wade," I said. "Wade what?" "Just Wade tonight." That made his smile widen. "Well, just Wade. You ride into town wearing that iron like you know how to use it." "I know how not to use it." The laughter behind me stopped. The man on the boardwalk studied me with fresh interest. "Is that so?" "That's so." His right hand drifted near his holster, not gripping, just floating there like a question. I kept my eyes on the street. Rain tapped harder against the rooftops. Somewhere a dog barked once, then fell silent. "You calling me out?" he asked. "No. You afraid to?" Yes. That answer confused him. Men like that were used to pride. Pride was a handle they could grab. A man who admitted fear gave them nothing to pull. He spat into the mud. Keep riding, Red. I was already doing that. I heard the other two mutter, but none of them followed. Not yet. Bishop carried me past the saloon, past the lot barber shop, past a church with a cracked bell hanging in its little tower. At the end of the street, the train station stood dim and lonely. One lantern burned beneath the roof of the platform, swinging in the wind. I dismounted beside the hitching rail. The station door was open. That was wrong. Not wide open. Just a few inches. Enough for the rain to push in. Enough for darkness to breathe out. I tied Bishop loosely, the way I always did when trouble had a smell to it, and stepped onto the platform. My boots knocked hollow against the wood. The lantern swung overhead, making shadows crawl across the boards. Inside, something moved. I stopped. Station master. I called. No answer. The wind pushed the door another inch. I eased it open with 2 fingers. The room was small. Ticket counter to the left. Bench along the wall. Potbelly stove cold in the corner. A timetable hung crooked beside a map of the rail line. And on the floor behind the counter lay an old man in a brown vest. Dead. I knew it before I crouched. His eyes were open. Blood darkened the boards beneath his shoulder. His hand still gripped a pair of spectacles, crushed in his palm. I exhaled slowly. Damn it. The word was barely out of my mouth when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast. Not a man's heavy charge. Lighter. Desperate. I turned as a woman stumbled through the station doorway and nearly fell into me. She had red hair. Not orange. Not auburn hidden in shadow. Red like flame caught in rainlight, tangled loose around a pale face. Her dress was torn at the sleeve. Mud streaked the hem. Blood marked her left arm, though I could not tell if it was hers. Her eyes found mine. For half a second, she looked ready to scream. Then she saw my gun belt. Please, she whispered. Don't let them find me. I caught her by the shoulders before her knees gave way. Who? She tried to speak, but fear closed her throat. Her gaze jumped past me, toward the street. I heard voices outside. Men's voices. The same men from the saloon. Miss, I said softly. Look at me. She did. What's your name? Eleanor, she breathed. Eleanor Reed. All right, Eleanor Reed. Is that your blood? Some. Can you walk? Yes. The voices came closer. One man laughed. Another said, she came this way. Crow said she wouldn't get far. The name landed hard in the room. Crow. I had heard that name in border towns, cattle camps, and bad dreams shared over whiskey. Silas Crow. Fastest gunfighter west of the Mississippi. If men telling the stories were to be believed. Killer for hire. Duelist. Railroad enforcer. A man who did not just shoot men. He arranged the moment, so they had to reach first, then smiled while witnesses called it fair. Eleanor saw the recognition on my face. You know him, she said. I know of him. Then you know what he'll do. I looked down at the dead station master. I'm starting to. She gripped my coat. They killed my father. Outside, Boots stepped onto the platform. I moved Eleanor behind me, not roughly, but quick enough that she understood. My right hand stayed open at my side. The door creaked wider. The smiling man from the saloon stepped in first. His smile faded when he saw me. Well now, he said, this is getting interesting. Behind him stood the scarred man and the cigar chewer. Rain dripped from their hats. Their hands hung close to their guns. The smiling man glanced past me. There you are, Miss Reed. We've been worried sick. Eleanor's breath shook behind my shoulder. You don't have to do this, I said. The smiling man looked amused. Do what? Whatever you were sent to do. He stepped farther inside. You best move aside. No. The room went still. The kind of still that comes right before thunder cracks. His eyes narrowed. You already told me you were afraid. I am. Then move. No. He smiled again, but it had no humor left in it. You know who we work for. I heard the name. Then you know you're standing between that woman and a man who doesn't miss. I looked at his hand. He noticed. You watching my draw, Ed? I'm watching your choice. That angered him more than an insult would have. His fingers twitched. Behind me, Eleanor whispered, "Please." I did not know whether she was begging him not to draw or begging me to stop him. Maybe both. The man's coat shifted. His hand dropped. And for the first time that night, mine moved too. Not first. Never first. My Colt cleared leather as his revolver came up. The room exploded with sound. His shot went wild, punching a hole through the wall near the timetable. Mine struck him in the shoulder and spun him backward into the ticket counter. The scarred man cursed and reached. I fired again. His gun fell from his hand before he could lift it. The cigar chewer froze. Smoke curled between us. Rain hissed outside. The smiling man groaned on the floor alive, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The scarred man held his shattered wrist and backed against the wall, teeth clenched. The third man slowly raised both hands. "Smart," I said. My voice sounded colder than I felt. Inside, my heart hammered like a fist against a locked door. Eleanor was trembling behind me. I could feel it through the air. Then a new voice came from the platform. Calm, smooth, deadly. "Well, well," the man outside said. "Looks like Black Hollow finally found itself a hero." I turned toward the open door. A tall figure stood beneath the swinging lantern, dressed in a black coat, slick with rain. His hat brim shadowed most of his face, but I saw the pale line of a smile. Silas Crow. He did not reach for his gun. Not yet. He only looked at me. Then at the wounded men inside. Then at Eleanor hiding behind my shoulder. "You must be Wade Mercer," he said. I said nothing. His smile grew. "I heard you never draw first." My fingers tightened around the Colt. Crow tilted his head, amused by the silence. "That's a noble rule," he said. "But rules have a way of dying after dark." Thunder rolled over the mountains. And in that moment, standing in a dead station with Eleanor Reed behind me and Silas Crow smiling in the rain, I understood something I had spent years trying not to learn. Some nights did not care what kind of man you wanted to be. Some nights came to show you what kind of man you were. Silas Crow smiled at me like a man admiring a coffin before the funeral had even begun. Rain drummed against the roof of the station, while the lantern above the platform swayed in the wind, throwing crooked shadows across his face. He stood perfectly still, one hand resting near his belt, the other hanging loose beside his coat. That calmness bothered me more than shouting would have. Men who feared death moved fast, talked loud, and reached for iron too early. Men like Crow moved slow, because they already believed the world belonged to them. Behind me, Eleanor's breathing was uneven. The wounded gunman groaned on the floor beside the ticket counter, clutching his shoulder where my bullet had gone through. The scarred man leaned against the wall holding his ruined wrist, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold. Crow barely looked at either of them. "They failed you," I said. "They're alive," Crow replied. "That already makes them more useful than most men I hire." The cigar chewer still had his hands raised. His eyes shifted nervously between Crow and me, like he was trying to decide which one of us was more dangerous. Probably me at that moment. My revolver remained pointed low, but ready. Crow noticed. "You got a steady hand, Mercer." "I've had practice. I can see that." His gaze drifted toward Eleanor. She tightened her grip on the back of my coat. "There's nowhere left to run, Miss Reed," Crow said softly. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "You murder my father," she shot back. Crow sighed almost dramatically, like he was tired of hearing the accusation. "Your father made unfortunate business decisions. He refused to sell." "That too." My jaw tightened. The storm outside deepened. Wind rattled the station windows hard enough to make the glass hum. I kept my eyes on Crow. "What business?" Crow chuckled. "You're curious now. I'm deciding whether burying you would improve this town." That earned a grin from him. "There's the problem with men like you, Mercer. You pretend not to enjoy violence, but the second somebody gives you a reason, that little monster inside starts stretching its legs." I'm still talking. "Yes," he said, "which means you're still hoping this ends peacefully." He took one slow step onto the platform. "I already know it won't." The wounded man on the floor groaned again. Crow glanced at him with annoyance. "Get up, Dillard." "I can't feel my arm," the man hissed. That sounds like a personal problem. Even his own men looked afraid of him. That told me more than rumors ever could. Crow finally looked back at me. Here's what's going to happen. You hand over the girl. You ride out of Black Hollow before sunrise, and everyone walks away breathing. You expect me to trust your word? No, he admitted, but I expect you to understand odds. The scarred man gave a weak laugh from the wall. You don't know who you're dealing with, cowboy. I looked at him. I know enough. Crow tilted his head slightly, studying me. You were in the war. Not a question. Yes. Confederate. No. Union then. His smile widened faintly. That explains the conscience. I said nothing. Crow's eyes sharpened. You know what I learned during the war? That you enjoy killing? That nobody remembers decent men. He spread his hand slightly. The world remembers winners. Fast men. Ruthless men. Men willing to do ugly things before the other side realizes the game started. You sound proud of it. I am. Lightning flashed behind him, bleaching the station white for half a second. In that flash, I saw something cold in Crow's face. Not anger. Not madness either. Conviction. That was worse. Madmen could be unpredictable. Men with conviction built empires from corpses and slept well afterward. Eleanor stepped closer behind me. He has the papers, she whispered. Crow's eyes flicked to her instantly. There it was. The first crack in his composure. Miss Reed, he said carefully. You should not say things you don't understand. She hid them before you killed her father, Eleanor said to me quickly. He doesn't know where they are. Crow's smile vanished completely. The station suddenly felt much smaller. What papers? I asked. Eleanor hesitated. Crow answered first. Land deeds. Liar, she snapped. He ignored her. Old mining claims. Nothing worth dying over. Then why are people dead? Crow's jaw tightened slightly. Interesting. Eleanor looked at me desperately. My father discovered silver deeper in the mountain. Not just silver. Something bigger. The railroad company wanted the land cheap before anyone else learned about it. Careful, Crow warned quietly. He refused to sell, she continued. So they sent him. Crow sighed. I was hoping not to kill anyone else tonight. You came prepared for it anyway. That's why I stay employed. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills again. I thought about leaving. Truthfully, I did. I had survived this long by staying out of other men's wars. A smart cowboy passed through trouble instead of marrying himself to it. Black Hollow smelled like the kind of place that swallowed outsiders whole. But then I looked down at the dead station master, then at Eleanor, then at Crow smiling in the doorway like the devil waiting patiently at church, and I knew the road out of town had already disappeared behind me. Crow took another step forward. My revolver lifted slightly. So did his hand. Not drawing, just reminding me how close death stood between us. You know my reputation, he said. I know stories. Most are true. That's supposed to scare me? No, he smiled again. It's supposed to educate you. The cigar chewer slowly edged sideways toward the door. Crow never even looked at him. Go get the sheriff, Crow said. The man hurried out instantly. Eleanor stiffened. The sheriff works for him. I figured. Crow nodded approvingly. Smart cowboy. You burn ranches too? I asked. If the owners become difficult. You kill women? Only if they scream too much. Eleanor flinched behind me. My grip tightened harder around the Colt. Crow noticed immediately. There, he said softly. Now I see the real man. The real man is trying very hard not to shoot you. And I'm trying very hard to give you a reason. The storm outside intensified, rain now crashing hard enough against the roof to nearly drown the silence between us. Then footsteps approached from outside. Several pairs. Sheriff. Deputies maybe. Or more hired guns. Crow smiled faintly. Looks like your choices are shrinking. The station door opened wider. Sheriff Tom Avery stepped inside, wearing a soaked brown coat and a silver badge dull with age. Two deputies followed behind him carrying rifles. Avery stopped when he saw the wounded men. Then he looked at Crow. Not at me. Not at Eleanor. Crow. That told me everything. Well, Avery muttered. This got ugly fast. Crow nodded toward me. Cowboy started shooting. The sheriff looked at the bullet holes in the wall. That's so. He defended himself, Eleanor protested. Avery barely acknowledged her. Miss Reed, he sighed. You're causing trouble again. She watched her father get murdered, I said. The sheriff looked annoyed by the interruption. You got proof of that, Cowboy? No. Then all I see is 2 wounded men and an armed drifter. Crow folded his arms calmly. I told you Mercer would complicate things. So the sheriff already knew my name too. That unsettled me. Avery stepped farther into the station. Now let's all calm down before somebody else dies. Crow chuckled softly. Little late for that. One deputy kept his rifle pointed loosely toward my chest. The other stared nervously at Crow, almost like he feared him more than he respected the badge beside him. Smart deputy. Avery rubbed rainwater from his mustache. Mercer set the gun down. No. His eyes narrowed. You want a war? No, I answered honestly. But I think one already started. Crow smiled wider. Now you understand, Black Hollow. Eleanor suddenly gripped my arm harder. I glanced down. Her face had gone pale. What is it? She whispered so quietly only I could hear it. There are more outside. I listened carefully. Boots. Several horses. Metal jingling. Crow had not come alone. Of course he had not. The sheriff saw my expression and smirked tiredly. You're outnumbered, son. Maybe. But I had been outnumbered before. During the war. Numbers stopped mattering once shooting started. Fear, positioning, timing, those mattered. A nervous man with a rifle could miss at 10 feet. A calm man with a revolver could kill 3 before the echo faded. Crow looked almost excited now. You know, he said. I heard stories about you years ago. Wade Mercer, the red-haired soldier who walked through crossfire like death forgot his name. Stories grow in bars. But some stories earn themselves. His eyes drifted toward my revolver again. I've wanted to see your draw for a long time. That sounds like a bad ambition. Oh, it is. His smile sharpened. For one of us. The station became silent again except for the storm. Sheriff Avery slowly rested his hand on his holster. The deputies tightened their rifles. Crow remained perfectly relaxed. And I realized something dangerous. This was exactly how he liked it. Pressure. Fear. Too many guns in a small room. He built moments where men panicked before he ever needed to shoot. Then Eleanor spoke words that changed everything. My father had the original railroad contract, she said loudly. Crow's eyes snapped toward her. He signed nothing, she continued, which means the land still belongs to us. Even the sheriff looked surprised. Crow's calm expression finally cracked. Only for a second, but I saw it, and that second told me the truth. This was never about revenge, never about pride. It was about land worth millions. Crow slowly looked back at me. You should have kept riding, Mercer. Probably. Because now, he said quietly, you know too much. Then every lantern in the station suddenly went dark. A gunshot exploded outside. Glass shattered, and Black Hollow descended into chaos. The darkness hit the station like a physical thing. 1 second I could see Crow's cold smile and the sheriff's nervous eyes. The next, everything vanished. The lanterns shattered almost at once after the gunshot outside. Glass burst across the wooden floor, and Eleanor screamed somewhere behind me as the station dropped into blackness, broken only by lightning flashing through the rain. Then came the shooting. A rifle roared from outside the station. One of the deputies cried out. Boots slammed against wood. Men shouted over each other. And in the middle of it all, Silas Crow laughed. Not loudly, not wildly, just once, like a man enjoying a private joke. I grabbed Eleanor's arm and pulled her down behind the ticket counter as bullets punched through the station walls. Splinters exploded through the air. Somebody overturned a bench. Another gunshot blasted near the doorway, deafening in the cramped room. Stay down. I barked. Her fingers clutched my coat, so tightly I could feel them through the fabric. Sheriff Avery was yelling something, but panic had swallowed his authority whole. One deputy fired blindly toward the windows. Another stumbled somewhere near the stove. I kept low, revolver ready. Not firing. Listening. That was something the war taught me. In darkness, The man who listened survived longer than the man who panicked. Another lightning flash illuminated the room for half a heartbeat. I saw Crow near the doorway, still standing, still calm. His revolver was already drawn. The flash vanished. A shot exploded instantly afterward. One of the deputies collapsed screaming. Crow moved during darkness, between lightning like a wolf moving between trees. Deadly, patient, impossible to predict. I fired once toward the doorway, not to hit him, but to force him back. The bullet smashed the doorframe. Outside, men shouted. Then came the thunder, massive and rolling over the mountains, hard enough to shake the station roof. "Mercer," Crow's voice called through the darkness. "You still try and save everybody?" I didn't answer. A hand suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I spun instantly, revolver halfway raised. Eleanor. Her face appeared pale in another flash of lightning. "There's another way out," she whispered frantically. "Storage room." "Where?" She pointed deeper into the station. Another bullet tore through the counter inches above us. Wood exploded across my hat brim. I grabbed Eleanor's wrist. "Move." We crawled low through the darkness, while chaos consumed the station behind us. Sheriff Avery was shouting orders nobody obeyed anymore. One wounded man cried for help. Another gunshot blasted from outside, followed by the crash of breaking glass. Black Hollow had become a battlefield. Again. I hated how familiar it felt. Eleanor pushed open a narrow door behind the baggage shelves. We slipped into a storage room filled with crates, coal sacks, and rusted tools. The air smelled of wet wood and machine grease. She shut the door softly behind us. For a second, the sounds outside became muffled. Not gone, just distant enough to breathe. Eleanor leaned against the wall, shaking. I checked my revolver quickly. 4 rounds left. Not ideal. "You hurt?" I asked. "No." "You sure?" "Yes." She wiped rainwater and tears from her face angrily, embarrassed by them. That told me something about her. Strong people hated crying in front of strangers. "We can leave through the freight door," she said. "It opens behind station." I nodded slowly, but I wasn't thinking about escape anymore. I was thinking about Crow, about the way he moved in darkness, about how every man in that station, sheriff included, reacted to him like prey reacting to a predator. Men like Crow were dangerous because they enjoyed pressure. Most killers feared the moment before violence. Crow seemed to come alive inside it. Eleanor watched me carefully. "You fought men like him before." "Not exactly. But you're not surprised." "No." Another lightning flash seeped through cracks in the walls. Outside, horses screamed. Then came more gunfire farther down the street. I frowned. "That's not Crow's men." "What do you mean?" "They're shooting too wild." Crow's crew moved like professionals. Controlled. Disciplined. This sounded different. Drunk panic. Desperation. Then we heard shouting outside the station. Town voices. Black Hollow citizens. The chaos was spreading. Eleanor swallowed hard. "This is my fault." "No. They came because of me. They came because greedy men wanted something. That still got people killed." I looked at her for a moment. "You know what we're taught me." "What?" "That bad men always find reasons. Land, money, pride, flags, revenge. Doesn't matter. They'll always invent reasons to hurt people." Another gunshot thundered outside. "The fault belongs to the people pulling triggers." She looked down quietly after that. For a moment neither of us spoke. The storm hammered the roof above us. Then came footsteps. Slow footsteps. Approaching the storage room. Eleanor froze instantly. So did I. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Silence followed. Then Crow's voice came softly through the wood. "You know, Mercer, most men would have abandoned her already." My revolver rose silently. Crow continued casually, like we were discussing whether over whiskey. "That's your weakness." I stayed quiet. "You think protecting people makes you different from men like me." Still silence. "But the truth." Crow chuckled softly. "You still kill when cornered. Only difference is I stopped apologizing for it." Eleanor trembled beside me. I watched the doorknob carefully. Crow leaned closer to the door. "I know your kind. Men haunted by graves. Men pretending restraint is morality instead of fear." Lightning flashed through the cracks again. His shadow crossed beneath the door. You know why fast men die young, Mercer? I finally answered. They meet faster men. No, his voice darkened slightly. Because eventually they hesitate. Then the footsteps moved away again. Slow, unhurried, like he already owned the night. Eleanor exhaled shakily, once his presence disappeared. How can someone become like that? I stared toward the door, piece by piece. We waited another minute before moving. I eased the freight door open carefully. Rain crashed outside in silver sheets. The alley behind the station was empty. For now. Come on, I whispered. We slipped into the storm. The cold rain soaked us instantly as we moved behind the station, toward the narrow back streets of Black Hollow. Mud sucked at my boots. Wind howled between buildings. Somewhere farther in town, men were still firing guns. The entire place felt ready to explode. We kept low beside a row of storage sheds until Eleanor suddenly grabbed my arm. There, across the alley, stood a small stable with dim light inside. My father kept horses there, she whispered. There's a trail behind the mountain. You trying to leave town? We have to. Maybe she was right. Maybe survival meant riding away before sunrise and never looking back. But another part of me already knew Crow wouldn't allow that. Men like him didn't stop hunting because prey ran farther. They stopped when prey stopped breathing. We reached the stable door. I pushed it open carefully. Inside stood 3 horses and an old Mexican stable hand, sitting beside a lantern with a shotgun across his lap. The old man nearly aimed at me before Eleanor spoke. Mateo. His eyes widened. Miss Eleanor. He lowered the shotgun immediately. You should not be here, he whispered urgently. Neither should you. Mateo shook his head grimly. Town's turning to hell tonight. A little late to notice, I muttered. The old man looked at me carefully. Recognition slowly crossed his face. You're Wade Mercer. I sighed softly. Everybody in this town knows my name. Mateo looked nervous suddenly. Crow asked about you days ago. That got my attention fast. Days ago. He nodded, said a red-haired gunfighter might pass through eventually. Cold realization crept into my stomach. Crow knew I was coming, or at least suspected it. But how? I had no family left. No permanent ranch. No predictable route. I lived half my life wandering cattle trails from one territory to another. Unless the war records, railroad contacts, old bounty reports. Someone had been tracking me. Eleanor saw the expression on my face. What is it? I looked toward the storm outside. This wasn't an accident. Mateo handed me a box of rifle cartridges. You'll need these. I opened it. .45 rounds. Fresh brass. Enough for a real fight. I looked at the old man. You helping us could get you killed. Mateo shrugged tiredly. At my age, fear gets heavy to carry. Before I could answer, hoofbeats thundered outside. Fast. Multiple riders. Mateo extinguished the lantern instantly. Darkness swallowed the stable. We stood frozen as horses stopped outside. Then came Crow's voice again from somewhere beyond the rain. Calm. Certain. You're running out of places to hide, Mercer. I slowly loaded fresh rounds into my Colt. Click, click, click. The sound felt louder than thunder. Beside me, Eleanor whispered nervously. What do we do? I looked toward the stable doors, while rainwater dripped from my hat brim. For years, I had survived by avoiding fights, by leaving towns before trouble became personal, by refusing to draw first. But Black Hollow was changing something inside me. Crow wasn't just hunting Eleanor anymore. He was hunting fear itself, trying to prove that every man eventually breaks. Outside, Boots stepped through the mud toward the stable. Then Crow spoke one final sentence through the storm. Come outside, Mercer, he called, or I burn the whole town down around you. The rain kept falling, but Black Hollow no longer sounded like a town. It sounded like war. Gunshots echoed through the streets beyond the stable, while frightened horses kicked inside their stalls. Somewhere near the church, people were shouting. Windows slammed shut. A woman screamed. Then came the crack of another rifle, and sudden silence afterward. Silas Crow had done exactly what men like him always did. He turned fear into a weapon. I stood near the stable doors with my revolver loaded and ready while Eleanor watched me from the shadows beside Mateo. The old stable hand gripped his shotgun tightly, though his hand shook from age and exhaustion. Outside, Crow's men moved through the mud. I could hear at least 4 horses, maybe more. The storm made counting difficult. Crow's voice came again, smooth as oil. "You know I'll do it, Mercer." I believed him. That was the problem. Men who threatened towns usually wanted surrender. Crow wanted domination. There was a difference. One type used fear to win something. The other used fear because it pleased them. Mateo whispered, "There's a tunnel behind the stalls." I glanced back. What kind of tunnel? Old mining path. Smugglers used it years ago. Where does it lead? North Ridge, beyond the river. Eleanor stepped closer immediately. "We can escape through there." Maybe, but I already knew escape was becoming impossible. Crow had planned this too carefully. The sheriff belonged to him. The town feared him. And somehow he had known I would arrive in Black Hollow before I even crossed the county line. That bothered me more than the guns outside. "Mercer!" Crow shouted. "Last chance." Then came another sound. Fire. A bottle smashed somewhere outside, followed instantly by roaring flames. Orange light flickered through cracks in the stable walls. One of the buildings nearby had been set ablaze. Eleanor gasped softly. "He's burning the town." Crow laughed outside. "You still hiding in there, cowboy?" My jaw tightened. The war had taught me many things. One lesson stayed with me longer than the others. Some men only stop when someone finally stands in front of them. For years I avoided becoming that man. I buried the violent parts of myself beneath cattle trails, lonely roads, and quiet nights under open skies. I convinced myself peace was something you could outrun toward, but violence had a way of following certain men, and tonight it had followed me to Black Hollow. I looked at Eleanor. "If we use the tunnel, can you guide Mateo out?" "Yes. You know the mountains?" "I grew up here." "Good." I turned toward the stable doors again. "What about you?" she asked quietly. I checked the cylinder on my Colt one final time. "I'm gonna buy you time." "No." Her answer came fast and sharp. "You can't fight all of them." "Probably not." "Then come with us." I almost smiled at that. Almost. There's no running from Crow anymore. She stepped closer. "Then we leave together." Outside, another bottle shattered. Flames spread brighter through the storm. The firelight painted the stable walls red. Crow's voice darkened slightly. "I'm losing patience, Mercer." Mateo looked at me carefully. "You knew this day would come someday, didn't you?" That question hit harder than expected. Maybe I had. Maybe every man with blood on his hands secretly understands the past is patient. I nodded once. "Yeah." Then I pushed open the stable doors. Rain exploded across my face instantly. The alley beyond glowed orange from burning buildings farther down the street. Smoke twisted upward into the storm clouds, while thunder rolled over the mountains like distant cannon fire. Crow stood 20 feet away beneath the rain. Black coat, black hat, silver revolver resting low beside his thigh. 3 gunmen spread behind him near their horses, all armed, all watching me carefully. Crow smiled slowly. "There he is." I stepped into the mud. Behind me, the stable doors remained partly open. Eleanor stood hidden in darkness beyond them, though I knew she was watching. Crow noticed too. "She still believes you can save her." "Maybe I can." "No," he said calmly. "You can only decide how many people die trying." One of his men spat into the mud. "Just shoot him already." Crow never took his eyes off me. "No," he said softly. "This one matters." Rainwater dripped from my hat brim onto my revolver hand. My heartbeat stayed steady. That surprised me. Years ago, before every gunfight, fear crawled through my stomach like snakes. Tonight felt different. Not calm. Not confidence either. Acceptance. Crow slowly walked forward through the rain. "You know why I wanted you here?" he asked. I was wondering. "Because legends rot eventually." His smile sharpened, and I've spent my life proving it. Lightning flashed behind him. For a second, the whole alley turned white. "You built your reputation on restraint," he continued. "Mercy, honor, rules." He shook his head faintly. But men fear killers, Mercer. Not good men. Then why are you so interested in me? That made him pause. Only briefly. Then he smiled again. Because somewhere deep down, you're still like me. No. You sure? He pointed toward the burning buildings. Look around. You think decent men survive nights like this? My grip tightened. Crow saw it instantly. There he is, he whispered. One of the gunmen behind him shifted nervously. Boss. Crow silenced him with a small gesture. Then he looked back at me. Tell me something honestly, Wade. It was the first time he used my first name. How many men have you killed? Rain hissed around us. The storm seemed to wait with the town. I answered truthfully. Too many. And yet you keep pretending that makes you different from me. You kill because you enjoy it. Crow shrugged slightly. And you kill because you regret it. His smile faded. Which one of us sounds weaker? The words hit harder than bullets should have. Because part of me feared he was right. I remembered faces. Young soldiers bleeding in muddy fields. Outlaws collapsing in dust. Men gasping final breaths while staring at me with shock in their eyes. Every grave stayed somewhere inside me. Crow noticed the hesitation. He stepped closer. That's why you lose. The movement was subtle, but I saw it. His right shoulder shifted. Tiny. Barely anything. Enough. My revolver cleared leather before his fully moved. The gunshot shattered the alley. Crow's hat exploded backward as my bullet ripped through the brim instead of his skull. He fired at nearly the same instant, his shot grazing my upper arm hard enough to spin me sideways. Pain tore through my shoulder. Then the alley erupted. Crow's men drew instantly. So did I. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped into the mud before they understood the duel had become a massacre. The third gunman fired wildly toward the stable. I shot him through the chest. Everything happened in seconds. Fast. Violent. Final. Then silence returned beneath the storm. Only Crow remained standing. Blood trickled from a cut above his ear, where my bullet had torn past. For the first time all night, Silas Crow looked surprised. He touched the blood slowly, then smiled. A real smile this time. You drew first. The words landed like a hammer inside my chest. Because he was right. For the first time in years, I had drawn before another man fully reached for his gun. I stared at my revolver. Rainwater mixed with blood on my hand. Crow laughed softly. There it is, he whispered. The truth. I hated how deeply those words cut. Behind me, Eleanor shouted, Wade. More riders were coming from a far end of town. Crow heard them too. His smile faded slightly. This isn't over. No, I agreed. It's not. For a second, we simply stared at each other in the rain like 2 wolves, deciding whether the next bite would kill. Then Crow slowly backed toward his horse. You know what happens now, he asked. I kept my revolver aimed at his chest. You run. No, his eyes darkened. Now you become exactly what you feared. Lightning flashed again. Crow mounted his horse in one smooth movement. A man who kills first. Then he rode into the storm with the remaining riders, appearing behind him, like shadows swallowed by rain. I stood alone in the alley breathing hard. My wounded arm burned. 3 dead men lay in the mud around me. And Crow's words echoed louder than thunder. You drew first. The stable doors burst open behind me as Eleanor ran toward me. You're bleeding. I noticed. She grabbed my arm carefully while Mateo rushed out behind her with supplies. But my attention remained fixed on the dark end of town, where Crow had disappeared. Because deep down, I knew he was right about one thing. The man who walked into Black Hollow was gone, and the man standing there now scared me far more. By sunrise, Black Hollow looked like a town that had survived judgment. Smoke drifted through the streets in gray ribbons, while exhausted townsfolk carried water buckets between blackened buildings. The rain had finally stopped sometime before dawn, leaving behind mud, shattered glass, and the smell of wet ash hanging over everything. I sat on the porch outside the abandoned church, while Mateo wrapped fresh cloth around my wounded arm. You should rest, the old man muttered. I'll rest later. That is what stubborn men always say before funerals. I almost smiled. Almost. Across the street, Eleanor stood near the well helping a frightened little boy carry supplies to his mother. Despite everything that had happened, she moved with calm determination, comforting people who had spent years too afraid to comfort themselves. Black Hollow was waking up, not peacefully, but differently. Sheriff Avery had disappeared before dawn. One deputy claimed he fled town after Crow rode out. Another swore he saw Avery stealing money from the jail office before escaping into the mountains. I did not care enough to chase him. Men like Avery survived by kneeling before stronger monsters. Once Crow lost control of the town, the sheriff became what he truly was. Nothing. Mateo tightened the bandage on my arm. You keep staring at the road. He'll come back. The old man nodded grimly. Yes, because men like Silas Crow did not leave unfinished business behind them, especially not humiliation, especially not another gunfighter who had marked his face and killed his men. I looked down at my revolver resting beside me on the church steps, the same Colt I had carried through war, through cattle trails, through lonely years spent trying not to become someone worse. But now every time I looked at it, I heard Crow's voice again. You drew first. That truth sat inside me like poison. Eleanor approached quietly after helping the family across the street. She carried 2 tin cups of coffee, handing one to me before sitting beside me on the porch. You should sleep, she said softly. Mateo already tried. And I ignored him too. That earned the smallest smile from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The morning wind pushed smoke through the empty street, while workers repaired shattered windows nearby. A dead horse still lay near the saloon covered by a blanket. Black Hollow had survived the night. Barely. Eleanor looked toward the mountains. My father used to say this town was beautiful at sunrise. He was right once. And now, I took a slow sip of coffee. Now it looks honest. She studied me carefully after that. You're blaming yourself. No. Yes, you are. I stared ahead silently. She lowered her voice. You saved people last night. I killed people last night. You did both. That was the problem. The line between protector and killer had always seemed clearer in my head before Black Hollow. Now it felt blurred. Dangerously blurred. Eleanor leaned closer. You drew first because he was going to kill you. Maybe. He was. I looked at her finally. You sound certain. I saw his eyes. So had I. That was what troubled me most. When Crow moved for his gun, I did not react from fear. I reacted from instinct. Years of violence buried beneath restraint had surfaced before thought could stop it, and the speed of it frightened me. Before either of us could speak again, hoofbeats echoed from the far end of town. Every man on the street froze instantly. I stood. So did Mateo near the stable entrance. The riders emerged slowly through drifting smoke. 5 of them. Crow at the center. The cut above his ear was visible even from a distance, a thin line running beside his temple where my bullet had nearly ended him. The townsfolk scattered immediately. Doors slammed shut. Windows closed. Fear returned to Black Hollow like an old landlord reclaiming property. Crow stopped his horse in the middle of town. No smile this time. That worried me more. I stepped off the church porch into the muddy street. Eleanor grabbed my arm. Don't. He came for me. He came for both of us. Yes. I gently pulled free. Which means this ends now. Crow's riders spread outward slowly, rifles resting across saddles. Crow himself remained perfectly calm. You look tired, Mercer, he called. You look uglier. A few of his men chuckled nervously. Crow did not. His eyes stayed locked on mine. I've been thinking about our conversation. That must have hurt. You know what I realized? He ignored the remark completely. You and I finally understand each other. No. Yes. His voice hardened slightly. You stopped pretending last night. I walked farther into the street. Mud sucked at my boots. You burned a town for land. I built power. You murdered innocent people. I removed obstacles. His men watched silently now. Even they seemed uneasy around him after the previous night. Crow tilted his head slightly. You still don't understand the world, Wade. That makes 2 of us. No, he pointed toward the frightened buildings surrounding us. These people survived because of men like me. Railroads. Money. Expansion. Civilization is built by wolves while sheep take credit for the fence. And what are you building here? His smile finally returned. A future. I glanced toward Eleanor, standing near the church steps, then back at Crow. Looks more like a graveyard. That earned a flash of anger in his eyes. Good. For the first time, I had found something capable of reaching beneath his composure. Crow slowly dismounted from his horse. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. One of his riders shifted nervously. "Boss." Crow silenced him with a glance. Then he removed his gun belt slowly and handed it to one of the men. Murmurs spread through the nearby buildings. Even hidden townsfolk were watching now. Crow looked at me. No rifles. No ambushes. No interruptions. His voice carried through the street. Just you and me. A duel. Of course. Men like Crow always wanted witnesses. They needed their violence remembered. I should have refused. A smarter man would have. But some part of me already knew this could only end one way. I slowly unbuckled my own gun belt. Eleanor stepped forward immediately. "Wait, don't." I looked at her. For the first time since meeting her, I allowed myself to really see her clearly in morning light. The red hair tangled by rain and smoke. The exhaustion beneath her eyes. The fear she kept fighting down every second. And beneath all of it, strength. Real strength. Not the kind men bragged about in saloons. The kind that survives horror without becoming cruel afterward. I handed Mateo my hat. Then I looked back at Crow. Fine. The town became silent. No wind. No voices. Only distant creaking wood and the soft clink of metal as Crow rolled his shoulders once. We walked toward opposite sides of the muddy street. 10 paces apart. 20. Then we stopped. Crow's hand hovered near his holster. Mine stayed still beside my leg. I could feel every heartbeat, every breath, every scar earned across years spent avoiding moments exactly like this one. Crow smiled faintly. "You know the funny thing." "What?" "You still think this is about survival." I frowned slightly. "It's about identity," he said. "You want to believe you're different from me. And you want to believe nobody is." His eyes gleamed. "Because if good men can kill just as fast," he spread his fingers slightly near the holster, "then maybe monsters don't exist." The silence stretched. I thought about the war, about dead boys in blue uniforms, about lonely roads and cattle fires under cold stars, about every time I walked away instead of drawing. Then I thought about Black Hollow burning, about Eleanor trembling in the station, about Crow smiling beside murder like it was art. And suddenly the answer became simple. "No," I said quietly. "Monsters exist." Crow's smile faded. "You're looking at one." His hand moved. Fast. Unbelievably fast. But this time, mine did not hesitate. The revolver roared. So did his. Pain exploded across my ribs as Crow's bullet tore through my side. Mine struck him directly in the chest. Crow staggered backward. Shock crossed his face, not from pain, from disbelief. He fired again wildly. Missed. I steadied myself through the agony and fired once more. The second bullet slammed into him hard enough to spin him sideways into the mud. Silence swallowed Black Hollow. Crow lay staring upward at the pale morning sky. Blood spread slowly beneath him. I approached carefully, revolver still raised. His chest struggled for breath. When he looked at me again, the arrogance was finally gone. Only exhaustion remained. "You know," he rasped weakly, blood touching his lips. "You're faster than they said." I stood over him silently. Crow coughed painfully. Then, incredibly, he smiled one last time. "But you still became what you feared." The light faded from his eyes before I answered. The devil of Black Hollow died staring at the sky. And somehow, that did not feel like victory. The townspeople slowly emerged from hiding afterward. No cheers. No celebrations. Just relief. Heavy and exhausted. Mateo rushed toward me as my knees nearly gave out from the wound in my side. Eleanor caught my arm before I collapsed fully. "You idiot," she whispered through tears. "Fair criticism." She laughed despite herself. And there in the middle of the ruined street, surrounded by smoke, blood, and the broken remains of Black Hollow, I finally understood something the war had failed to teach me. Drawing first or last was never what defined a man. The real question was simpler. What kind of world did he leave behind after the smoke cleared? Weeks later, after the fires were extinguished and the railroad men fled Black Hollow for good, I saddled Bishop beneath a quiet sunrise. My wounds still hurt. Probably always would. Eleanor stood beside me near the edge of town. "You could stay," she said softly. I looked toward the mountains, glowing gold beneath dawn light. Then back at her. Part of me wanted to. God help me. Part of me truly wanted to. But men like me carried storms with them. And Black Hollow deserved peace for once. I climbed into the saddle slowly. "You'll rebuild this place," I said. "We'll try." I nodded. Then Eleanor stepped closer unexpectedly and kissed me softly before I could speak again. Not dramatic, not desperate, just honest. When she pulled away, her eyes stayed locked on mine. "You're not the man he said you were." I looked toward the rising sun. Maybe someday I would believe that too. Then I tipped my hat, turned Bishop toward the open trail, and rode out of Black Hollow alone while morning light spread across the Texas hills behind me.